Hello, everybody. I'm Joe McGovern, awards reporter here at TheWrap, and we are happy to have you for our award screening of Mars One with writer-director Gabriel Martins. Mars One is Brazil's entry for the Best International Feature Film category at the Oscars. We're going to show you the trailer for Mars One. Then we're going to go right into a conversation with Gabriel. And for our audience, please take part in the live stream, the live chat of the stream. Share your thoughts about the film and let us know where you're watching from. So now here's the trailer for Mars One.
Nina, você acha que o papai ia ficar bravo se eu não quisesse mais jogar futebol?
Você não quer jogar bola, não?
Não sei se eu quero virar jogador profissional, não.
Então fala com o papai, Devinho. Ele não pode te obrigar a fazer nada, não.
Não é que eu quero parar de jogar bola. Eu penso em fazer outras coisas também.
É? Tipo o quê? Que foi?
Você vai achar besteira, não vou falar, não.
Fala, Devinho, de ser bobo.
Meu sonho é virar astrofísico e participar de uma missão Marte 1.
Marte 1? Que missão é essa?
Uma missão que vai acontecer em 2030 aí, que nós, seres humanos, vamos tentar colonizar Marte.
Nossa, Devinho. Nem sei o que dizer. É isso mesmo que você quer? Ir pra Marte?
Eu tô construindo até um telescópio para poder observar melhor.
Telescópio?
Sabe que você acha besteira, não?
Não, Devinho. Não acho. É lindo. Um sonho lindo.
Welcome back. It is my pleasure to introduce writer-director Gabriel Martins. Hello.
Hi, what's up, Joe?
Good to see you.
Good to see you, man.
Congratulations on the film. Thank you for coming to talk with us about it. And lots to get into here. I want to, it's interesting right now. It's kind of the season of filmmakers doing these sort of auto fiction movies, like Steven Spielberg and Alejandro González Iñárritu and James Gray has a film called Armageddon Time about his childhood. And so the obvious question here would be there is a young boy in the film about a teenager age, and the family's name is Martins, which is the same as yours. So how much of the inspiration of this came from your own life? And then how did you figure out a way to create a narrative that wasn't, an autobiography, but was telling a story all its own?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. This is it's a film that it's me unfolding myself into many characters and bringing experiences from my life. I think it has a lot about my relationship with my father. My father is in the AA. And also, I think my father was very supportive. It was not like the character from the film, but at the same time, I had this feeling of silences that my father carried throughout his life and things that I was not able to talk to him. So I think it's a film a little bit about miscommunication inside a family. So there's that. And also, I was, as a young kid, dreaming to make movies since I was little in an environment that wasn't an obvious choice. So making movies was my Mars One in many ways, as it is for Devinho. So I can obviously relate to that. But I think it's also a vision about my family, my neighbors, people that was around me, that was not maybe specifically my blood family in a way, but it was my family since they were close to me. So I'm bringing a lot of things in this film and also bringing characteristics from many of my backgrounds spread through the characters. So I think that you can say Devinho has a lot of my childhood in a way, but at the same time, I can see myself in Tercia, in Wellington, in many different parts of my life, and also Eunice. So I think that's why I bring my surname to the film. It's my first solo film, so I wanted to make it very personal, very close to home.
And people, I guess they just watched the trailer now, but people who hear the title might think this is a science fiction.
Yeah.
But that's what's great about it, is that I love the title. But explain to us what it means, I guess, in the context of the film, but why also that word, because it's the same translation from Portuguese to English. Why Mars One really meant a lot to you as the title of the film.
It's interesting that at first it came just as the title of the true mission that they were planning to do to colonize Mars. And that gave me an interesting perspective that we want to get to know the universe, the expansion, and traveling to other planets, even though we're still having a lot of problems to deal here on Earth. So that was intriguing to me. And at the same time, when I kept thinking about this dream that this kid has to be part of this mission of discovering the unknown, it sounded me as a very radical possibility for a kid like him. So I think it could also represent something that is intangible in a way, something that you cannot reach, or it's not material in any way, but it's kind of a dream, maybe an utopia or something like that. And that made me think about reasons that we have to wake up every day and live our lives. And it's usually something that we probably will never achieve, like peace of mind or $1 million, or I don't know, any kind of dream that we have. Some of them are tangible, some of them are just something that keeps us going. So having that as the center point of the film, the title, I think it has that idea of expedition, of going into the unknown, that I think is a little bit about the story as well. This story, I think it's about this kid's dream, this family, but it's also about accidents and things that happen throughout our lives and shape us the way we are. So in a very weird, complex way, everything came back to this idea of expedition, of some kind of thing that we don't know what is going to get.
Yeah, and I do want to ask you in a few minutes about the wonderful ideas about fate and coincidence that appear. There's sort of a magical realism quality, but speaking kind of realism, actually, it's the family is in a lower economic class. However, the way you've structured the film, we actually see the wealth class, because the father goes there to do some landscaping and some gardening in very wealthy homes. So maybe if you want to talk about the setting, obviously Brazil, we don't get to see a lot of people in the rest of the world this side of Brazil very often. But what city did you choose, and was there any significance in your own life to where it was set?
Yeah, I chose to naturally film in the city where I was born and grew up. So it's a city called Belo Horizonte, but also Contagem. There are two nearby cities. Contagem would be like a smaller city where the working class usually lives. There's where my parents live right now, where I grew up. Belo Horizonte is more like downtown, where people work. It's a larger city, and for that, it has its economics contradictions and social inequalities, as you said. And the setting was because that was a natural environment for me to talk about. And also, I think I chose to portray the characters in this way and have these environments to come up with the subjects, and not the film to be kind of making an essay about these inequalities, because I just wanted to portray a specific culture and how that culture works. So it happens that both Wellington and Tessia works in spaces that are not designed for them in a way, because they can afford to live in the places where they work. And that is the reality of most of Brazilian people and Brazil community, especially that those characters represent. So I think my goal was to kind of comment on a culture without having to actually have an essay. So it's not like by seeing Wellington in his work, we are portraying the inequalities and seeing that, and we don't actually have to all the time talk about what that is and what does that mean. Everyone can just perceive that by whatever the characters are going through. The injustice in the work part, like it happens to Wellington, and I don't know, and how each of them feel. So I guess it was just to bring some kind of an urban culture that is very common in Brazil that might not be in other cultures, but everyone can kind of understand what actually that means in a worldwide perspective.
Yes, for sure, and that is a natural way to lead into talking about the politics of the film. And it's funny because you and I met last week or 2 weeks ago at a party, and we talked about politics a lot. We talked about the recent Brazilian election, and then you asked me about the midterms here. But the film, the film is not overtly political. It's not a film that's lecturing or trying to tell people that they're wrong or that they're right. However, the film opens, it doesn't say this in the film, but it opens on a very important day in recent Brazil history. It's October 28th, 2018. And the first word we hear in the movie is Bolsonaro.
Yeah.
The president who was elected, a right-wing president who was elected on that day and just lost about 2 or 3 weeks ago, the presidency. So we hear, it's very much in the background. I don't think the characters even spend much time like debating politics in the movie, but it's always there. So how important was that for you? And actually, did it coincide with the filming? I mean, because this movie was actually shot a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, we shot, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks after the election.
Wow.
So for sure, the presence of Bolsonaro wasn't something that was planned on the script, because as you guys might know right now, it was even something that was pretty much starting to happen as a fact in the year of the election. So I wasn't trying to bring this to the film as a major theme, but I knew that I wanted to set the film at the time of the shooting. So whoever had won would be the president. That would be something that would the film start to, because I was trying to think about this kind of pairings. Brazil, each odd year, like 2018, 2022, is always World Cup and elections and presidential elections. So the film talks a little bit about that. In this final cut, it doesn't bring soccer as in the World Cup, but in previous cuts, we actually had the World Cup in 2014. So it was like a major subject of the film, this kind of World Cup and politics. But in the end, I think Bolsonaro's winning the election, I think, was a very turning point about this idea of miscommunication that I was talking about inside the family, and also a very cultural significant moment that I was not unable to kind of erase from the film, because I wanted to set the film in this time, and the subject of that time was that. And I think specifically in that scene that you mentioned, I think it was important to have this opening contradiction of there are fireworks and someone won the election, and that person represents a lot of very complex things that the film does not discuss at all. But in a few scenes later, we will see that Bolsonaro is kind of aligned with a conservative thought of imprisonment and black community. So when we open the film with a kid literally looking at the sky and dreaming at the beyond, when at the same day someone that is trying to bring the country back to somewhere else, I think it was a beautiful contradiction, an interesting contradiction at least, that what is the future of Brazil through the eyes of Deivinho, at the same time that someone won that represents everything that the country doesn't need to be anymore. Very conservative, very white. So that contradiction was very interesting to me. And as I said before, to understand this as a part of a larger culture that Bolsonaro represents, and it's spread throughout the film, even though we don't have to mention all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the film is so much better as an experience for us in the audience for it not... I think it also shows that because, Bolsonaro lost the recent election, but he still got a lot of votes.
Mm-hmm.
He has a lot of support. And it shows how, though it gets so inflamed, our politics, people in the day-to-day life still just go around and, you got to do your job, you got to take care of your kids, there are other things that people care about. And I think the film illustrates that quite beautifully by having it there, but just not making it the main focus.
Yeah, and at the time, Joe, since it was like 2-3 weeks before, that was a very huge shock in like the artistic community. Everyone that relates more to a left-wing perspective, in a way, it was a very big shock because people didn't actually thought that was going to happen. I think the same thing happened here in the US with Trump in the past. So having those characters for me to kind of understand, let's think about a bigger picture. The Brazilian society is very complex, and I think we need to understand what happened. And for me to kind of film this family that they are not perfect, they are not heroes in any way, I think it was some way of also starting to understand humanity in all of this very weird process of elections that it is so far. This year was not different at all. It was still a very weird process for our country when we are involving people like Bolsonaro. They are very radical and very, I don't know, not progressive at all, just making noise at all times.
Well, so talking about that, the kind of weirdness of politics and of elections, I want to talk about the mother character in the film, and maybe have you talk about the actress, who's just marvelous. I mean, she's so wonderful as the sort of centerpiece performance of this movie, although it is an ensemble for sure. She, from the very beginning, she feels like she has hands of fate. There's just things that happen to her that she can't quite explain, and and we can't explain either, watching it. And it kind of continues all throughout the film. Where did that idea come from as for that character? And maybe if you want to just mention the actress.
Yeah, the actress is Regiane Faria. We've worked before in short films, and she did small parts in feature films that my production company produced. She's first of all, she's my personal friend for a long time, so it was no brainer to have her in this movie, because I think she's just a wonderful actress. But this was actually her first time as a protagonist, the first time she had some actual time to show off her skills. She started very late in the game. She wasn't an actress that started very young. She worked for a long time in the post office. So then she just started to acting after her 40s, in a way. So that is so interesting to see her. She's such a very talented actress, but I think she's also part of this environment where people like her, or that looks like her, a Black woman, didn't have any chance to pursue an acting career. So part of the reason that I put her in this film is just to make justice for her talent. And there you go, she's wonderful in it. And I think this story of Tessia, which is personally my favorite, or at least was my favorite to write, because I think that we are having the film structure in this kind of daily routine. So they wake up, they go to school, work, university, and then they go back home and have dinner and talk about the day. This is the idea of cycles in the film. But I think at some point when we start to pay attention to Tessia, especially after what happens, I think everything starts to mean something else, or could mean something else. Because I think when we're talking about life, I think especially in Brazil society, we're very spiritual people. We have a lot of faith. We believe in chance a lot. This idea of life being kind of a lottery. You don't know what's going to happen, and you put faith on it. You treat yourself spiritually in many ways. So I think Tessia could bring this kind of perspective that has to do with planets, with signs, and things like that, that I think the other narratives doesn't have that much. So I think Devin was looking at the stars in a way of a scientific perspective, that he's curious. and Tercia might be relating to all of that in the same way, but in a spiritual way.
Yeah.
So when she comes to the story, for me, is a way to connect these both worlds of science and faith as something that you kind of go along together, at least from my perspective. I'm not a very skeptical person. I believe in chance. I believe in magic in this sense.
Yeah.
So I think when Tercia comes, I think she brings that flavor to the story of, wow, there's something else going on. There's something spiritual in the world that is not just, we do that happens. There's something that is kind of orchestrating everything that I think is very cinematic in many ways.
Yes, and I want to really ask you about your directorial eye, your style, and working with your cinematographer. There's amazing master shots where you just hold, and maybe the camera moves a little bit, long takes, not real big show-off long takes, more simple, but with a lot of forethought, so that we see the camera go from the faces to the hands, to the faces of the parents. You know, in one shot, we're seeing this whole story play out. But I want to bring her up again, bring Tessa, because early in the film, she's having lunch, and a man walks in and actually sets off a bomb in the little cafe that she's in. And we in the audience, as well as her, don't realize it's a prank. It's a TV hidden camera show. And it comes back in the film at the end in a great surprise. But what about your approach to a scene like that? So not showing the audience first that it's going to be a prank, but letting us sort of experience it the way that she did.
Yeah, I think this idea of long takes, they have two perspectives in this film. The first of the perspectives is like to complement an idea of invitation. This film is inviting you to spend, 3 months with that characters, and to really spend time with the environment, with their faces. So you look at their faces for a long time when they're going to something. Each of the characters has a long close-up shot that we keep lingering, and we see the extra, everything happening outside of that shot. So the first idea, this idea of invitation, that you can spend a time looking at everything that is happening in the field and not cutting all the time. The second thing is a possible idea of tension that I think some of those close-ups has, and this particular shot has, that you have no idea when the film gets to that point. The film is not telling you that it's going to be that kind of film in any way, that
Right.
something like that might happen. So I love how we can use the background to kind of portray something that is odd in a way that you can actually put your finger on. This guy is circling her. I like the blocking of it. But for me, there's something very funny about it, because we are seeing Tercia's reaction, and she's our link to the scene because we already know her. And at the same time, that doesn't seem natural at all in that way, what this guy is doing, the way he's moving. So I think that brings this idea of tension with something that was not supposed to happen, because when he brings out that kind of cartoonish dynamite, you don't know if the film didn't have enough budgets to have an actually cool dynamite. You don't know what is going to. So I think it kind of tricks your mind into what the hell is happening right now. And this idea of a long shot, I think, gives you time to have these different kind of perceptions, because I'm not telling you, oh, look at here, look at here. You have to choose where to look, whether you look to Tercia's face, whether you look to the dynamite, the guy moving. So I think this idea of giving the audience some kind of choice in the frame, I think it's a way to invite them to be part of the film and invite them to be part of the expectations, to toy with the expectations, something that like magicians do when they divert your attention to here as something is happening right here. So I think it's a mix between those ideas of a film being able to control your emotions and also inviting the audience to be there. And I think having those choices throughout the film, having a more patient look at the scenes, I think makes people more into the scene. I think sometimes filmmakers think it's the other way around. If you cut it a lot, you involve the audience. That sometimes might be true, but the kind of film that I like, I think it gives you time to look at things. It gives you time to be there and wait a little bit.
Yeah, and you just mentioned, you began by talking about the close-ups, and I think it's remarkable because, as you say, every character kind of has at least one moment in the film where we just get to watch them, but especially after the fake bomb goes off, and I think the next shot is just her face at the table having dinner. We don't hear, we hear them. We don't see anyone else talking to her, but they're all talking as she starts to emotionally explain what had happened to her that day. When you're writing, and then in your mind you're seeing the what the scene will look like, is that pretty clear to you when you've conceived it, that we're going to use a close-up here? Or on the day of filming, do you take a bunch of other angles and then decide in the editing to just show the close-up?
In that case, I didn't shot anything else.
Yeah.
I had completely faith in her, with her possibility of carrying that shot.
Yeah.
I think I didn't actually came exactly in the writing, but definitely in the rehearsal, I couldn't take my eyes off her while she was delivering that speech. I think this actually, I planned in the writing that this comes right after a very weird thing happened in the film that was not actually, the screen goes blank right when the bombs explode. So it's actually clearing the mind of everyone who's watching this. From now on, this film is going to have something else. So that was a very safe choice in a way, even though it's bold, because I had a very big trust that this is something that after that weird thing happened, now we can just see it and kind of go through her mind a little bit, especially because just before we didn't actually spend so much time with Tercia so far. We had some things happening, her birthday, but now is the first time we actually stopped to look at her for a while. So it was a safe choice in that way. And I think she didn't even do many takes because it was so good from the beginning in the rehearsals that I had completely the secure choice of shooting nothing else. And that might bring an insecurity when you're editing, but in that case, I just trusted completely that choice because it made so much sense. Yeah,
I love it. I mean, what's going on in that scene too is that her family are kind of laughing at her and saying, oh, what's the big deal? We don't need to see their faces as they're talking. We just need to see her reacting to what they're saying, and how they're kind of not they're not letting her have her moment, really. So as someone who knew you were going to be a filmmaker from a young age, I'm curious to ask about other films or even books, television that has been an inspiration to you, not even relating to this film so much, but just some of the guiding lights that have been for you and as you've been growing up.
Awesome. There were a lot of things. I think when I was a kid, I grew up watching. We used to have this thing in Brazil where in the afternoons they would show like afternoon screenings, and there was usually films like Home Alone, Big, and this kind of very classic American films that I think shaped a lot of my taste in many ways before, because I thought they were films that were very popular, classical blockbusters, but at the same time, they always had something. When I revisit those films today, I always thought they had something very weird also in it. They have this some anguish or something like that. It was not like dumb films or anything like that. They were very complex films. So I'm very John Hughes fan. I'm a very Chris Columbus fan in many ways. And later on, I started to pick up on more deep filmmakers, and I was very influenced by many American filmmakers from the 70s and also from other parts of the world, but especially Scorsese, Brian De Palma, William Friedkin, and other directors from outside of the US, but that were successful in US, like Paul Verhoeven and filmmakers like that.
Yeah.
And later on in the game, I started to be very interested in filmmakers. And when I got to know Black filmmakers, they were not very popular in Brazil, but they are now very close to me, like Charles Bournet from the LA Rebellion, of course Spike Lee at many times, and experimental filmmakers from all around the globe, like Maya Deren and Agne Varda, Claire Denis,
Yeah.
and in a lot of Brazilian films. I think at young age, like when 17, 18, I discovered very experimental Brazilian filmmakers and filmmakers from the Cinema Novo, but also from the marginal cinema. The marginal cinema in Brazil that happens in the late 60s and 70s, filmmakers like Rogério Sganzerla and Andrea Tonati. There are filmmakers that are not known across the globe, but they are very intense to me because they show me you can portray the Brazilian culture in a very intense perspective. And they shot very low budget and many times, and that was something that when I was beginning, it made sense to me. So I think I'm very influenced by many filmmakers, Paul Thomas Anderson as well. His work is very important to me to kind of have a perspective about camera, how to move a camera, and all the classic ones. But I think some of the names that I'm quoting, John Carpenter a lot. I think a lot of filmmakers that really know how to block a scene and to move a camera. And now seeing The Fabelmans by Spielberg, I think I can relate to that thing very much. This idea of kind of a melodrama, but at the same time, when you can narrate something, that first shot in Fabelmans is something that when I saw was mesmerized, how you can with one shot present two characters and then present a setup, the film, a cinema theater, and that's one shot says everything about the film. I love that. I can relate to that a lot. And that's something that guides my filmmaking in many ways. That symbolic way that cinema can portray something. As you say, in Mars One, we begin by seeing the space, and Devinho is seeing it alone. And in the end, we have the same space, but now the family's together. So there's circular idea that images can bring in the narrative is something that I can relate to those filmmakers.
Yeah, and it's also, it's great to hear you mention all those names, because I think what links a lot of them is that amazing storytellers, but you're also picking up on the craft.
Yeah.
And then sitting there and being, as an audience member, you're being moved by it, but you're also, you're learning from it.
Yeah.
This is what happens when you block a scene that way, or you hold the close up for longer than, a conventional movie would do that. Yeah, wonderful. I mean, I love hearing all those names, and I think people will watch your film and also see that it's very unique and has a great sense of its own time and place. But also there are these great moments where I think we're seeing your gifts as a filmmaker learned from the lifetime of watching movies.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, with all that, I'm also a big fan of disruptive things like South Park and the Eric Andre Show. This is like my favorite things to watch because I think they question the status quo a lot. And that is something that when I always want to make a film, even though it's a family, very affectious film like Mars One, I'm thinking if in any ways this is bothering the status quo in some sense, if that is trying to be disruptive and even a minimal sense, because I'm very influenced by this kind of anarchy that some of these shows brings, and something that Atlanta and some of the things that trying to bend the way that we are perceiving things.
I just a few more questions for you, but one of them I wanted you just to see if you talk for a minute about the daughter character in the movie, another very special character, and we see her in the beginning, and she meets a woman, and they begin a relationship. And what's radical is that it's not radical. It's not. The film is not drawing great drama out of the fact that she's gay.
Mm-hmm.
Even to her parents. I mean, they observe it, but they don't. They're much more concerned about her moving out of the house.
Mhm.
And what was that? Was that intentional on your part to present a character like that, but to not make it the first line in the plot description of the movie?
Yeah, I think for sure. I think I was very inspired by. Well, I started writing this or thinking about this film in 2014, and from 2014 on, with all the political turmoil in Brazil, that was that emerging character that was the Black women that were activists, that were leading strikes in schools at a very young age, that was participating, and everything came together in a very dark way with the assassination of Marielle Franco in Brazil, which was something huge and was a very deep cut in the women's community, especially the Black women. They felt that assassination as it was something that were actually related to, and I could feel that as well because it was something very unfair and dramatic and something that we are not used to see in our society with someone that is a politician be assassinated like that.
Yeah.
And Marielle was a Black woman that was also gay, and she was a prominent figure. I already had the character written when that happened, but that kind of came together with that importance of this character as something that could represent the future. And for me, it was very interesting to see that new romance as part of a new model of family for her. But at the same time, I didn't want to kind of pointing out all the time what that identity would actually mean in a much broader way rather than just being part of her, who she is. It was more like this idea of her as a political person. I could like have these contradictions with her father, but someone trying to have this independence, and an independence that comes with financial aspects, which comes with breaking in some way the relationship with her father and mother, more like a generation process going on.
Yeah.
This idea of you have to kind of break up with your family to find your own way. She having a woman as a girlfriend or wife or family, I think, of course, in a society like Brazil, that would mean something else. That could mean something else. But I was just interested in doing that because it's just like the character came to me. It wasn't something that I was planning to comment on because I think everything was already there. As the same thing for Bolsonaro, everything else, just that being part of the culture. That is the shape of many families. In real life, Cicero, who plays Davinho, his sister is actually also gay. I didn't know that when I wrote the film. This is an example of how common she is because this is actually the story in Cicero's life and their parents. So it was just another characteristic and something that I want to bring in films to have this kind of things that it might be perceived as tragedy or a story that is going to be about suffering with this identity. No, there's good things and bad things that will happen because you have this identity, because you are in a world that doesn't accept that. But at the same time, you are a human being with other things happening in your life. And then I think that this was very well perceived in the LGBT community because I'm got a lot of feedback about that. I wasn't expecting that. It was something natural for me, but they made me understood how that was important, even though I wasn't thinking all the time the effect that this could have. We won a lot of awards here in US in LGBT festivals. That was also surprising for me.
Yeah, when it's you know, you don't have to thunder it home. You don't have to pound away on the message, which is, I think, a theme of this conversation so far. So there is I want to also take a minute to ask about there's a cameo in the film on YouTube from Neil deGrasse Tyson, who we all know and love as one of the most pop science. Oh, he's a very serious scientist, but he's become famous for his ties and his personality. It's an older clip that David is watching on YouTube, but do you want to talk about including that in the movie as a way to explain the Mars One project? And also, has Neil deGrasse Tyson heard of the film or seen the film, as far as you know?
first of all, to include him was like a natural thing because I was following him a lot and
Yeah.
kind of I love the way he could talk about astrophysics and biology and everything and bring into to a common sense or common knowledge that people like me that are not well versed in all those themes. I could understand a lot of things by watching Cosmos and watching his say. And
Mhm.
I think that this personality thing was something that I kind of also wanted to do with this film, to kind of have complex themes, bring rap in something that is very accessible in a way that you could access by emotions or
Yeah.
poetry or whatever you might call it. And so far, I have no idea if to watch the film because there was a screening in LA. There was someone that saw the film that was close to Neil deGrasse Tyson, and they said they would bring the film to his attention, but I haven't heard so far. I hope so. I really wanted for him to watch the film. I think he's going to like this idea that we are portraying a young kid that wants to go to Mars. He's being a science enthusiast. I think he'll be very happy to see it.
And he even gets, as a Christmas present, he gets tickets to see Neil deGrasse Tyson speak. So lastly, I want to obviously congratulate you on being the official selection from Brazil. It's a great honor and a privilege. Brazil's never won that award, actually, and there's been several nominees over the years, but it's been, I think the Walter Salles film, Central Station, was the last one, and then Fernando Meirelles was nominated for Best Director, City of God, which I think was not eligible or something. But how does it feel? I mean, no matter what happens, this is why we're speaking now. It's going to be bringing the film to a lot more people and getting attention to it. Maybe just mention your reaction and your happiness at finding out that your film was chosen.
Well, we were very surprised because I think even though our film was building a career here in the US since it premiered in Sundance, so
Yeah.
the first semester of this year, I came to the US 4 times to present the film. So it was something natural that we were already having this kind of relationship with here, where the Oscar is. But at the same time, we are a very small production company. We are a production company we reside outside Rio and São Paulo, where usually the big market is. And the previous nominations or the previous films selected to be part of Brazil was from that area. So actually, this is the first time from my state. This is the first time a Black director is being selected to represent Brazil. So it's a lot of firsts, and this idea of being an underdog, of course, comes with a lot of surprises. And as you mentioned, Walter Salles' film Central Station was the last one. It was 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we had this expectation in Brazil about the Oscars, and I feel very honored to represent that. I think Mars One might highlight a possibility of future films from Brazil. I think this kind of film represents kind of a change of pace because when we think about Black films, we are not being watched in USA a lot. Even in Brazil, there's not a lot of Black filmmakers doing feature films so far. So it's a small sample, and I think Mars One is highlighting the power of this kind of independent companies in Brazil, smaller companies that can make a lot of noise, that can make big films. So I'm very honored to be here. I'm taking this opportunity to kind of carry more knowledge about Brazilian filmmaking that I think we are trying to struggle after Bolsonaro's government. We're trying to have a comeback of our films, and I think Mars One might help that in many ways with this campaign and bringing this kind of knowledge.
Wish you the best of luck. It's a beautiful film. Since you've actually filmed it nearly 4 years ago, and I think, have you had a baby since then?
Yeah, I have a 2-year-old daughter, which is also actually here right now.
Has the film sort of changed, even though it's locked and it's going to be the same movie from now until forever? Has viewing it changed for you through this whole process of the last couple of years?
Of course, I'm a completely different person right now. And the funny thing, is that I actually have a huge dream of my daughter become an athlete. You know, I'm not as obsessive as Wellington, and I'm not going make her through that my personal obsession. But I really dream for her to be an athlete. It will be so awesome. And now I see myself, I'm just becoming everything that was kind of trying to deconstruct in the film. But definitely, I think I understand the parents more now. I understand their worries as something that the actors, Carlos and Rejane, brought with the film, them being parents at that time. I now have a knowledge of what this feeling is, this feeling of wanting your kids to be close by, or trying to think about the future, or trying to control everything. I have now a responsibility as a father that I didn't have when I make the film. So I'm a completely different person, and I think I can see the film in different ways right now. I can perceive it in different ways. And that's the good thing about films and art, that they even though they are the same cut, I think 10 years from now, I will watch Mars One with a completely different perspective, and I will see things that I didn't even thought at the time, even though I was the writer-director of the film.
Yeah. Are there members of your family who are in the film?
Yeah. In the AA scene, the last person speaking and getting the medal is actually my father. So,
oh, that's great.
Yeah, and I have also my aunt, my father's sister. She plays the doctor in the film. She's actually a nurse, and she's playing a doctor in the film. And a lot of friends that has play supporting characters and things like that. Yeah.
And one other quick question, because as everyone who's watched this know, you speak English so well. I'm curious if you're involved at all in the subtitling for the English language territories.
Yeah, for some part of the process, I do revisions, and I was involved a little bit, but due to time and a lot of things to do with the finishing process, I was also the editor of the film, so I was always busy. I didn't make all the subtitles, but I was supervising a lot of them in many ways. So we have a few changes after Sundance, because we thought we could translate some things better, and we felt also people might not realize this, but I was reading Letterboxd a lot during Sundance, since I wasn't able to be there because due to COVID. And I got some pointers of how to improve the subtitles from the audience. So I improved the subtitles since then. So yeah, I was part of the process.
Well, I bring that up because I really noticed how, especially the humor in the movie that can be a little bit lost in translation sometimes, really comes through.
Awesome.
Sort of the phrases that people use, because we should mention that it's a touching family story, but it's very funny.
Yeah. I love that kind of humor. I think that brings us closer to the film as well. Yeah.
Well, again, best of luck and congratulations, and I guess hold your breath for this whole next couple of weeks. It's going to be wild, but really wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much, Joe.
And thank you everybody for joining us today. And in order to keep up with upcoming Wrap screenings and events, be sure to take advantage of our free trial to Wrap Pro. And you can catch up on any past screenings you may have missed by visiting TheWrap.com and going to the screenings tab on the homepage.